Hey, Blue Rockers, welcome to Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis. How are you tonight? We've got a really good show for you tonight, but I want to remind you as well, Bigfoot Friday is happening tomorrow, and that'll be at 10 p.m. Eastern. We have a bit of a sound thing going on. Hopefully we can figure out what that is along the way, so sorry that that's happening. Maybe you guys don't hear it. But tomorrow night, it's Bigfoot Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll have something really cool for you tomorrow night. I'll tell you more about that as time goes by. Saturday night, it's Coast to Coast AM. I'll be on with Jerry Wills, who is a healer and adventurer, and he's all sorts of things. He's kind of like this jack of all trades. I think you'll enjoy the show. He's the featured guest, and kicking that off is going to be Samantha Ellen Ritchie, and that happens at, well, you guys know your local listings, right? It's 1 a.m. Eastern for me, but she's going to be talking about the little people. And then on Sunday at 1 p.m., it's Stan's Bible Lecture. So we have a lot of good things coming up, and I'm also, of course, Crypto Connie Tuesdays we have, and then we have, tonight is signature Blue Rock Talk night. It's just signature night, or Far Out Thursday if you want to go like that. That's fun too. But it's kind of, Blue Rock Talk is Earth's most interesting conversations, and that includes people, places, and things, and that's how it all started. So tonight is kind of a potluck kind of night. It can be all sorts of things that might not fit into Bigfoot Friday and might not fit into Crypto Connie and might not fit into, something I'm going to do on Wednesdays. I'm truly thinking about Wasted Wednesdays. That will be all about the cannabis world and what's going on with that, medicinal wise, curing wise, how to put it together, what's going on with it. With a lot of experts. So I think that would be another successful night. Let me know your thoughts. Put them in the comments below. And while you are here, please hit that like button. Please subscribe if you haven't. We're building this up. And please comment along the way. Now, we're going to talk with my guest here at the beginning and let him do his thing. And then we're going to take some questions from you. So when that occurs, please put them in capital letters all the way across, but wait till later in the show because I'm not going to be able to roll all the way back and forth. It's not easy. I try. So kind of save that for later. So one other thing, I guess, Go Big Blue. Now, I didn't really plan this. In fact, I didn't even get any tea until just a minute ago, and this was the only cup available. And, of course, they're playing right now in the Sweet 16, Go Big Blue. Come on, you got to do that whenever you can. It's a shameless plug. All right, let's, without further ado, let's bring in the guy, my expert. Is he an expert? Is he a researcher? No, I think he's just somebody that was in either the wrong place at the right time or the right place at the wrong time. We'll let him tell us what he thinks that should be. It's Travis Walton. Everybody, if you could give us a nice, warm welcome for Mr. Travis Walton. Hey, Travis, nice to see you again.
Good evening. Good to see you.
I like that in the background. What do you got there? You got your own...
Oh, that's a poster for the DVD. Travis is the name of it. I would never name anything Travis, but that's what they called it.
I like it. It looks good. So what do you have out there? Okay, you have a book, Fire in the Sky. I got the link down below to your website so people can go. And then you have the movie that Hollywood did, Fire in the Sky.
Yeah, Fire in the Sky there.
And then you have some.
And I've been in discussion with a number of producers about doing a remake. There's a tremendous interest in the public in seeing a dramatic recreation that sticks closer to the real story. Fire in the Sky took some liberties.
It sure did. And we would all love if you could do it that way. Holy cow, we would love that. That was one of the things that really bothers me. And, I have a background of television and film and radio, but that's the one thing that bothers me the most about Hollywood. I mean, I love look, I mean, we all love these types of movies. They're fun. They're, what Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. and all the neat. Those were great. They were fun to watch, and it's an escapism. But when it's the real deal, you want them to tell the real deal, especially when you're saying, hey, this is a true story, not just based on a true story.
Yeah, we're dramatizing it, but it's this. We're talking about some real life incident, and I can think of a couple of examples: Gorillas in the Mist and the Bruce Lee story, things where I knew about the real life events, and there was, I think, no excuse for Hollywood to get creative in certain places. The real fans, and there's many of them.
Yes.
Know about the departures, and they're not positively impressed by that.
That's exactly right, and that's the thing to me is it's already a fantastic story, right? It crosses all the lines of the norm. So why do you need to take it a left when we, the fans of all of these, know that you're taking a left? Because at that point, when you ruin it for us, we kind of let people know because, it's not right. We want people to see the right thing, and they didn't need to do any of that with you. And at one point, we'll definitely talk about the differences in the movie that
one thing I always try to get in there is that I had no control over that and was not aware.
I know.
Until it was all said and done.
Well, you mean you didn't want to be... if I remember correctly, you didn't want to be naked when you came back 5 days later?
That's your obligatory Hollywood nude scene.
I know.
Actually, they filmed something that went a little further than that, but even the crew thought it was pretty unsavory, and I'm glad they didn't use that part.
What was that? What did they do?
Where I... go wake up naked, and I go off looking for help, and I run into a couple getting it on in the back of a car, and they start screaming, I'm screaming, and you got the other three naked people screaming, and they said it was pretty dreadful.
Oh, that's like Animal House or something. That's like a fraternity movie at that point. Travis Walton meets Animal House. That's it.
That's an outtake I'll probably never see.
Well, you know what? Just for fun, we should all do it ourselves, starring you, just as a fun little bit, and throw it on YouTube. That's awesome. Well,
there'll be a remake in the future. The discussions I had been having was about a feature film. But one of the most earnest people I've been in discussion with suggested recently that instead of doing a film, that we should do it as a mini-series. And I to me, that sounded like a cut down, a cut below. And I said, no, let's do a feature film. But I've been thinking about that. I think, for my goals in talking about this at all, it's really much better to do a mini-series. I'm interested in educating people, and it's an opportunity to get a lot more factual material in there, more than you could ever get in a 90-minute dramatization, and you reach more people.
Yeah, I think it'd be great, and I think it's worthy of that too. It's totally worthy of it. You didn't have just a one incident thing, and you didn't have where, maybe you thought this or maybe you thought that. You had the entire, all of your friends, your coworkers, and everybody in the town, and then the rest of the world wondering about you.
Well, there's all sorts of issues to get into, the scientific analysis of things that happened at the site, medically, physiologically, government cover-up type stuff, covert government investigations, and there's a whole lot of issues that that information wasn't even available back then. A lot of new stuff has come up over the years.
Well, let's get to it so we can learn everything. Let's. So, what was the time, or not the time, but what was the day?
November 5th, 1975. It was a Wednesday.
Okay, so November 4th, 1975. You wore Travis Walton A little cocky lumber guy, right?
Yep. Yep. We were all a bunch of tough lumberjacks going to work in the woods up on the high mountain, some of the highest country anywhere around there. And
what were your hopes and dreams at that point? That the day before, what was your plan of attack in life?
I wasn't thinking too far ahead at that point, but we were just pressing to get the contract done because it was fall and winter weather coming ahead. We wanted to get it done before winter weather would, make the roads too tough to get in there.
So you were about work and women at that point, right? That was it. You didn't think any further.
Yeah, that was right. And that's kind of what we were talking about when we saw this glimmer, this glow of light coming through the trees. We'd worked right up till sundown, so it was starting to get dark. And it wasn't like, wow, the second that light came into view, everybody, was riveted on it. It was just kind of like one by one. I'm not even sure in what order everybody noticed it, but it was something out of the ordinary. In the woods, you don't expect to see any light at all. But my first impression was probably deer hunters. It was deer hunting season. We heard shots in the distance all day, and but I could tell from the slope of the land that the light was coming from higher than where ground level would be. But gradually, when everybody started looking and trying to guess about what it was it the moon? No, there's the moon over there. The sun would be in that direction. That's already down. And finally, I said, Mike, hurry up, get up there where we can see, what it is. Because I could tell there was a break in the trees up ahead where the light was shining across the road. And as soon as we got to that point, we could see the craft hovering there. And it was unmistakable. I mean, we didn't have to guess what it was at that point. Alan Dallas, he was in the back. He yelled out, "It's a flying saucer!" I mean, it was nobody needed to say it, but it was just something where on impulse, I got out and headed towards it because, just like when we catch sight of a bear or a wild animal in the woods, you're lucky if you can get everybody to look in that direction before it's gone. So I got out, headed towards it, thinking it would take off before I got very close. And each step, increased my apprehension and that of the crew. They started to getting really anxious, yelling at me to get back in the truck and let's get the hell out of there, When I got up closer to it, where I was looking up at an angle, about a 45-degree angle.
Before you even got there, I mean, I understand the cockiness and all that kind of stuff and your age and, hey, you're a tough dude. I mean, you were doing that kind of work. But, man, I mean, at that point,
when I think back,
you had to think.
The world got into me, Steve and Alan, they were both sitting in the back. They said it looked to them like I was in a trance, but I think everybody had an entranced look on their face. They were saying they thought the aliens had mind control.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard that, Travis.
Part of their saying that is they're trying to make an excuse for why they didn't get out of the truck. But
that could have been true.
I have to make an excuse for getting out of the truck. It was such a foolish thing. But I told them it seemed like my idea, And they said, well, if they have mind control, they can make you think it's your idea.
And that is a big theory out there with people, too. Yeah, you're right. The people that talk about getting abducted all the time, that's what they would say. You're right. So you yourself feel like, no, that's not it.
Well, some of the crew thinks they were waiting for us, that they were after one of us. They were going to capture me. That was their plan on the part of the aliens. But, to me, it was just at the time, just kind of a chance encounter. a chance to see it up close. So it was really, really awesome. It was just amazing. And that's the general impression of everybody on the crew, that it was just so, I don't know, what's another word for awesome? It's just, it was just stunning. We're sitting there just,
was it stunning visually as well as emotionally and physically? Could you feel that even?
Yeah, all of the above, and, they said they could feel it, this energy in the air. Mike said it seemed like something was about to happen, and the apprehension that they were expressing, there may have been something building up, some sort of an electrical field, some energy field, a vibration. The sound it was making was so bizarre, it's just impossible to describe. Really, a mixture of highs and lows, a sort of cyclic sound that sounded very mechanical or like an energy. It's really hard to describe, but Mike said he could feel the vibration in the steering wheel in the truck.
Have you ever heard a sound similar to that any other time in your life?
I've never heard anything like that before. I gave a talk to a group of college engineering students, and they were keenly interested in the sound, thinking that maybe they could guess what, some aspect of the propulsion on the basis of the sound it was making. But I did my best, but, I don't have anything to compare it to. I've been around industrial machinery. I worked at the paper mill out there for 11 years, and there's just nothing like it. When I worked at the molding mill, there's some very, very high speed machinery, but I just never heard anything like that before or since.
So you get out of the vehicle, and it's been a long day too, right? You guys worked hard. It was dark enough to see the lights.
Well, in the film, it gives the impression that we had been driving for some time, and because a long, hard day, we had dozed off or were getting drowsy. That was not the case. We had been working so recently that everybody was in a very animated, the chatter that was going on was pretty energized, talking about the girls and what we're going to do tonight and all this kind of stuff. And, there was nothing drowsy about it. So we were, keenly alert at that point.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was thinking just not even from the movie, just, from being exhausted from working all day is what I was thinking. But that's cool. You're riveted, ready to go. You see this light, you get out. And what is the next thing you remember from right there and feeling it and seeing it? Was that like 30 seconds or so? I mean, was it a while where you stood there?
It was very quick. Everything happened so quick. It was smooth as glass. It was reflecting the surroundings and giving off light at the same time. It's kind of like if you are looking at the television and you can see the image on the screen at the same time, whatever the light from the window is reflecting off the TV.
Gotcha.
But it was so perfect and so smooth, glass-like, streamlined. Some of the guys compared it to an expensive sports car or something. What else do you say?
Right.
It was really just awesome. And I was sitting there looking at it, and they were getting really anxious. They were swearing at me, calling me everything to get back in the truck. And I was, feeling like, yeah, that's what I want to do. But it suddenly got louder and started to move. So I just dove for cover. It was just kind of an instinctive reaction. And I got down behind a log that was sticking up there. And I decided I was going to run back to the truck. But when I stood up, that brought my head as the closest to this craft that it had been at any point there. And that's when this blast of energy came out of it.
About how high was it up?
It was only like 15 feet above the ground.
Oh, okay.
So when it started to move, I jumped forward and down into a crouch behind the log. But when I stood up to run back, that's what brought me closest to it. And there's a lot of theories about that blast of energy. Some of the guys, I have to go by what they said, said 10, 20 feet. It threw me through the air with the violence of an explosion, like I'd stepped on a landmine. John said the way my body hit the ground, like a sack of meat, he said, like there wasn't a bone in my body. And it was definitely so violent, and the way my body fell, that they started yelling amongst themselves. Of course, I was unconscious at that point, but they were saying that he's dead, let's get out of here. And I really got to emphasize that Mike's reaction to do what the crew said, get us the hell out of here, there was nothing cowardly about that. He was responsible for the safety of the crew, and it would make no sense for him to get somebody else killed to save somebody they think is already dead. So, in the movie, when they got up the road, Mike came to the conclusion, look, we got to go back and see if we can help him, got a little better grip on the initial fear impulse. And the crew didn't want to go, that was true. But in the movie, when they said, Mike said, well, if you don't want to go back, you can just get out and wait here. Anybody that doesn't want to go. And the rest of us go back and see if we can help him. And in real life, nobody volunteered to get out and stand alone in the dark and wait for the truck. They all opted to stay in the truck, as daunting as that prospect was. They said in the course of going back, they argued about whether I was even in one piece when I hit the ground. Kenny was saying that his greatest fear was not that the aliens would still be hanging around, because they saw it streak off to the northeast, I think they said. But what my body was going to look like. Was I going to look burnt?
Wow.
In the police reports, the one sheriff deputy said the crewman described the energy as looking like a long blue flame. Others compared it to like a laser blast or a bolt of lightning. But it was an enormously powerful blast of energy, and enough to make them certain that it had killed me.
And this is all their perspective, and because you were out. But did they all pretty much collaborate on that? Were they all pretty much agreeing?
Yeah, this blast of energy, is it a flame? Is it a laser? Is it a bolt of lightning? But still, it's a very brilliant... one guy said he was looking in a different direction, but lit up the entire area brighter than day. And one other crewman said it was the brightest thing he'd ever seen in his life. But what it was... in the early days, I kind of accepted the idea that I had been struck with some kind of a ray, some sort of a weapon from the craft, that they had mistaken my approach for as a threat. Others thought maybe that they deliberately knocked me down in order to take me aboard, but in the intervening years, I've gone with the idea that it was some sort of an accidental discharge, that for whatever reason there was some kind of a energy built up there. One of the early theories that the debunkers used to explain away sightings by airplane pilots is that when they're flying through the air, the dry air traveling over the surface of the craft at high speed generates electricity charges, static charges, that can reach millions of volts. And that is true. Because as a student pilot, we would take a ground wire from the fuel truck and clip it to the plane before we brought the fuel nozzle close, because of this jump of energy, might come from the craft, from the airplane. And so I thought that maybe just the fact that, the dry fall air, the craft flying through there, had maybe built up a charge that accidentally discharged me to ground through me, and caused probably fatal damage. When they thought it had killed me, due to the violence and the power of that, it probably was a fatal or near fatal. And who else is in a position to rescue me? The nearest hospital, whichever direction they went, is either one would have been over an hour away. So it's probably a good thing that the crew weren't there in time to transport my body to a hospital, because that might have been some kind of irreparable situation.
If you're just tuning in, this is Travis Walton on Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis. I'm Connie Willis. I'm talking about his story, which you guys probably know as Fire in the Sky. Happened back in 1975 in Snowflake, Arizona. Correct, Travis? It was Snowflake?
That's true.
And, well, tell me where, right now in the story where you're talking about...
It's up on the Mogollon Rim, the highest point in the area. Okay. It's in the middle of the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world. And actually, when you look at the map, it's one of the biggest forests in the whole United States, continuously.
And Travis, I hear a lot about Bigfoot and still sightings of lights in that area still today. People were going to send me some pics about it.
A kid on another similar crew to ours. He was from a real religious family. He wasn't interested in the paranormal at all. And one day on the way to work, he looked over and he saw what he claims looked like this big hairy man stood up, looked right at him, and walked back into the woods. And for years, I had heard of, I'd never seen anything myself, but I'd heard of what they called the Mogollon Monster. And the Native Americans had all kinds of stories about these big hairy men. And, the skeptics who scoff at the idea that there could be anything that big living in the woods, with hikers and hunters out there, there'd be much more sightings. But in Arizona, the wildlife people tell us that there is a bear per square mile in the state of Arizona. And yet I can only count on one hand the number of times I've seen a bear in the wild. So it's a big, hairy, man-like creature with a vastly smaller population. It's not surprising that sightings would be quite rare.
Yeah, and when you see one, you don't forget it, and you're probably not. I don't know. I mean, people make up stories all the time, but when you see one, it's just. You don't forget it, and you come across telling your story in an authentic way. You can just tell when someone's got a story like that. That's just me. That's my vibe.
This kid,
I've learned a lot.
He was totally freaked out. He was just
that's
totally.
What you do, right? That's where I wish the skeptics.
I mean, he'd been used to going to work in the woods, and spending summers working on his dad's crew, and he never had a problem with being in the woods before that. But he was definitely. Affected by that.
How was he after that? Did he still go into the woods?
I think he did so with a lot of fear, but he wasn't on our crew, so I don't know the details other than what his report was. He said that the animal, it was hairy, but it looked to him like the face was kind of like the face of a sheep. And that was the closest analogy that he had. But it walked totally upright.
Well, we have something called Goat Man in Kentucky, and it is half man, half goat. And they say the bottom part of I guess the top part is man, and the bottom part with nasty fur, and the bottom part are the actual legs like a goat, where they're kind of funky. And I've heard of people that saw them. So let's get back to your story. So you take off. You're oblivious to any of this. What you're hearing now from any of your descriptions is from what the guys told you later, from what they saw. But now also, here's what the guys talk about too, that you only hear from them. They took off, right? So they take off. And I think you've said, hey, I would do the same thing. You weren't concerned that they took off and ran and left you, were you? I would feel the same way.
No, they did. They did what they had to do. And I give them enormous credit for having the guts to turn around and come back. Anybody else could have justified just going straight to get help. Yeah. So I consider those guys pretty damn gutsy to have gone back. They admit that they were terrified, but they were figuring, well, what if there's something we can do, to save his life, and I'm grateful to them for that. And none of them chickened out. I mean, some of these guys, one guy was only on the crew for 3 days, so it wasn't a close-knit group, but everybody throughout stuck by what we saw in spite of horrible accusations and, are you crazy? Are you lying? Are you hallucinating on drugs? A bunch of druggies, a bunch of crazy drugged out people. No. When you're out there working such dangerous work, you cannot be drinking or getting stoned or anything like that, or you're gonna wind up dead.
Yeah, that's pretty hazardous work for sure. I mean, that's I understand that totally.
Well, that drug hallucination theory is one thing that kept cropping up over the years, and to this day, there's somebody claiming that they have the inside story that was the case, but what they fail to realize is that as a part of the battery of medical tests that I underwent immediately upon my return was to have blood and urine samples put through the county medical examiner's drug screen. This is a very official government agency and very sensitive assay, found no trace of any drug of any kind in my body. But as with so many of the attempts to explain it away, they have to ignore major facts in order to make it fly.
Oh, it's just like trolls on the internet, It's just like, I just wish they'd just go somewhere else. So the guys, so you're gone. The guys take off. They have to. What do they do? Do they go somewhere and hang out for a little bit and decide what they're going to do? Do they go straight?
Well, it's a good half-hour drive back into town, I guess. So, maybe at least 20 minutes. And so they had time to kind of hash it over, and decide, we got to report it. There was some discussion about, no, they'll think we're crazy. Let's just get some friends and, make our own search and then report it. But, somebody said, well, what if he's never found and we don't report it? How's that going to look, So they immediately called the sheriff's department, and the deputy that came down there was impressed with that some of these guys were still crying, that he knew something really terrible had happened. And when the sheriff and his second in command showed up, and they start to tell the story, and they say, well, he might be dead. They're being law enforcement people, their ears perk up, and immediately they become suspicious that there was some kind of a fight out there. I mean, there had been a little friction between some members of the crew, fights, I guess you could say. Nobody got killed, but the sheriff was thinking that might have been what happened, that things got out of hand. I was killed. They hid my body out there somewhere. But what kind of a crazy cover story would aliens be? You know, it'd be much easier to say he went over the hill to use the restroom and never came back. Maybe a mountain lion or a bear got him, you know. That would be a much more plausible cover story if you were had hidden a body somewhere.
Do you ever look back and laugh about that, just like me right now, going, "Yeah, you're exactly right. Alien, no, we can't tell them the truth." You have to.
Well,
smile.
you know, I kind of sympathize with the lawmen because they could see these guys were dead serious. They were terrified. But at the same time, this is something they just can't believe. You know, the real cowboy type guy, real redneck type guys that, over the years, the sheriff maintained a public stance of being skeptical of the whole story. But I did receive, privately emails from friends and relatives of his who said privately, you know, he'll admit that he believes you, but he doesn't want to say so publicly. You know, he's running for public office. You know, after he was sheriff, he was the county supervisor. And another reason I think is that, you know, he was, after the movie, he was kind of complimented by a Wild West character like James Garner is portraying him in a movie, you know. And so if James Garner is a skeptic, I'm a skeptic too. You know, he wants to stay with that hard-nosed image. But
well, didn't the governor also of Phoenix or of Arizona do that with
same thing? Same thing.
Yeah,
he was
Phoenix
posturing
Lights.
publicly like he didn't believe it, but he was actually one of the witnesses to the Phoenix Lights.
Yes, absolutely. And he said, I was going to try to figure out some things myself on my own behind the scenes, and he said he just hit nothing but brick walls. But I'm glad he came clean at one point. So did your buddy come clean? Did the sheriff there come clean?
Well, at one time, in his final interview, and it's on this little video here, where he concedes for the very first time, and the only interview he ever did, where he kind of, in a very non-equivocal, I would say equivocal sort of way, they were trying to tell the truth, you know. Well, so he was at least admitting that much. But here I went to a film festival where they showed this film here, up in the Northwest, and James Garner had passed away, but his daughter came there just to see me, and she wanted to share with me that her dad. It had always bothered him that he had to play the part of somebody who didn't believe us when he really did believe us.
Excellent. That's so good to hear.
So it was nice of her, Gigi. It's James Garner's only offspring. And so it was nice of her to come and tell me that. She didn't know that he had pulled me aside at one event and told me that himself, but it was really nice of her to make the gesture and go to the trouble to tell me that James Garner believed us.
That's true. And it was nice that he did the same with you. How'd that make you feel when he did that?
I was really impressed. You know what? I was very impressed with Sheriff Gillespie's integrity. He and I had an experience years before, completely unrelated, in which he stuck by the truth in contradiction to claims that one of his deputies was making, you know. And he said, "Don't you lie to me," in a very stern voice to his deputy when he started to tell the phony version of what had happened. So I was very impressed with Sheriff Gillespie, that he was a man of integrity.
So can you tell us what that contradiction was?
And
you don't have to get into it deeply, I know it wasn't a fire in the sky. It was something more. Well, it's up to you. It sounds like you want to keep that private.
I'll tell you the story. It's colorful, but you know, I don't want to look like some kind of a ruffian, but I was kind of on the edge of things in the community. You know, it's a real religious community, and I wasn't a real churchgoer, but I had got a ticket for speeding or loud pipes or something with my car. So I went down to the courthouse at the appointed time. Judge did not show up. I sat on the step for a half hour. He never came. So I left. Well, the next day I'm walking down the street and they arrest me and throw me in jail for failure to appear. And I go into this cell and the bed is soaking wet. There's no place to sit except on the bed. The sink is torn off the wall. Apparently somebody, previous inmate had broken the sink and flooded the room. And so, being a resourceful young guy, I broke out.
You broke out of jail?
I broke out.
How'd you do
I won't
that?
get into that, but it wasn't the best jail in the world. But
okay.
I couldn't get out of the courthouse because the door was padlocked from the outside. And I'm a minor, and they never even informed my mother that I was under arrest. So I went up through the attic and came down in through the public library and caught a ride down to the sheriff's office in Holbrook, the county seat, and turned myself into the sheriff. Well, the local deputy comes in and says, yeah, we got us a real rough one here. He tore up our jail. And he said, don't you lie to me. I was down there a few days ago and that sink was torn off the wall then. And his deputy got real red in the face. But basically the whole thing was dropped. You know, they were, they had broken the law. They had not informed my mother. They had no business arresting me in the first place. And, but, you know, Sheriff Gillespie had stood up for me. He stood up for the truth. They were trying to blame me, and they were going to try to hang the destruction of that cell on me. And I didn't do a thing to it except escape from it. And,
I love it. Travis, that's awesome. That's almost as good as that's another movie in itself. So, okay, going back to it, that's great. I love that. So going back to it, all right, you're gone. The guys have 30 minutes to figure out what to do and what to say. And where do they drive right to? Did they go right to I don't know. You know what? You tell me, because that movie is...
Somebody on the internet claiming that they had met with the sheriff at the Red Robin Diner, and he had this whole debunking story made up. Well, the guy's a total liar. The Red Robin Diner did not exist for another 10 years. So there's no way the crew met with the sheriff at the Red Robin Diner. He was trying to make it look kind of like the movie, I guess, because the movie had some kind of a nightclub or a bar or something where they went.
Got a drink.
To report it.
Right.
But, and so when the people on the, some of the other people online saw this guy making the Red Robin Diner claim, they jumped his case about that. And he goes, oh, well, I meant the red onion. Well, there is a red onion here in Heber Overland, but that too did not exist for another 10 years. So the guy was trying to claim that he was the sheriff's nephew. I went to the town marshal and asked him, who could this be? And he didn't have a clue who this guy was. But he's still out there making these claims. And
what's that get you? I just don't understand that part. What is it?
They get attention by trying to have the whole inside story. He promoting the idea that it was a drug hallucination.
Well,
what about the medical test, you dummy?
Right. You know what? You yourself can tell the world that it is not the attention that you want to get. It's not the attention that you want to have in your life. Your life changed that day.
Media for a while, and the response for hiding out from the media was he must have something to hide.
Yes.
So the minute you say, okay, I will talk about it, then you're a publicity seeker, so you can't win, Yeah. And there was a number of years where I just wouldn't do any interviews, and that just let people like this guy that was pretending to be the sheriff's nephew get cranked up and get the attention he was so hungry for. But he was claiming really stupid stuff like that Alan Dallas lived in Concho, which is 5 miles from Snowflake, in his story. But it's not. It's way out there, And Alan Dallas did not live there. Everyone in the crew lived in Snowflake. But his version of the story had to fit in with a bunch of irrelevant stuff. And they were claiming that Kenny Peterson's family owned a house out there, just throwing in all kinds of details They had no. I guess what it was. I remember. Supposedly that's where I was for 5 days.
Oh, you were hanging out at the bar.
Yeah, out there at this place that he was saying.
Wow.
But
wow.
Anyway, the guy's story is just so full of ridiculous holes. He's trying to claim that there was Air Force maneuvers going on in the area at the time, and the crew really were mistaking Air Force helicopter pilots who were just, pulling a prank, chasing the crew through the woods. Now, you know that the blade span of a helicopter is so great, there's no way that's going to fit between the trees, 15 feet off the ground. And there's no way that the crews mistake what they saw, a helicopter. The blade would have hit the trees. It would be just stirring up pine needles and blowing leaves all over the place. Nothing about his story fits. And yet he's still trying to get attention with it.
You think he's trying to spread disinformation on it? You think he's been hired to do that?
Well, he's really so ignorant. You'd think he'd make it fit better. Everything is a mismatch. Lots of totally false information in there. But
we have a lot of that in the news.
It's not the only one.
It works.
It's not the one. There was a lady who claimed I went for a walk with her and fessed up to the whole thing. That I'd made up the whole story, that I'd just seen an anomalous light and then hid and then made up the story. That was what she claimed that she had on tape. Well, I said, okay, I've never met you, but if you have such a tape,
let's hear it.
I'll give you $10,000 if you can produce this tape with my voice on it. Well, she got furious and just exited from her little attention getting circle online, and nobody ever heard from her again. But
you nipped it in the bud, Travis. You nipped it in the bud. So your guys go down.
There's nothing like the facts to get in the way of a good story for these people. They make stuff up.
That's right.
And
that's right.
There's no shortage of people, locals, who will try to get some attention and make up a story about me or some of the crew.
Were you well liked at the time?
I had lots of friends, probably a few enemies, like I said. There's, sort of a division in town, redneck community. And just to have hair that touched your collar made you a hippie, quote unquote. Them long hair guys, just to have sideburns and a little bit of hair that come over your ear a little bit, that was long haired hippie stuff to them.
That was the 70s though, right? That was what was going on in the 70s. Well, if this never happened to you, if that day never occurred, if you were somewhere else that night, who knows? But if that happened, what do you think you'd be doing right now? You wouldn't be talking to me.
No, I wouldn't have been. I probably would have stayed in college,
What would you have studied?
Probably medicine.
So you might have been a doctor?
Might have been.
We can still call you we can call you Dr. Travis Walton if you'd like, just for the fun of it. You've been through enough.
My sister's an RN. I'm an EMT.
Oh, okay. You are?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay, well, that'll help in some of the other description. Okay, so the guys are back, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And it's 5 days before you ever come back. You're seen again. And you're not naked at the time. And you come back.
Although I certainly felt naked in the next few days, because the whole world was staring at me and trying to tear my life apart,
Yeah.
Looking any excuse to just cast this report aside.
So what the town was thinking? You were dead. The town was thinking these guys might have done something. Whatever it is.
Yeah, Don said he'd be walking down the street and people yell out, "Where'd you hide the body?" It was pretty rough. Even during the search, a Forest Service guy confronted Dwayne Smith, one of the guys on the crew, just grabbed him and jerked him up there and said, "Where'd you hide the body?" And was, figuring he could just intimidate him into confessing that he'd killed me.
Did you find out later that there were people that were believing and supporting the guys?
Yeah, there were people that were very believing. And in fact, some people who were believing who kind of exaggerated their friendship with me. I mean, there were people I hung around with and I knew, but, suddenly we were really close friends, girls that I only dated were now going to have my baby, I mean, all kinds of stories. There was this one guy, he said that when I got to the phone booth, first thing I did was phone him. And then when he wasn't home, then I called my family. Are you kidding? I was in such a terrible shape. There's no way I would have thought to call him.
You had one dime. Come on. So how did you call?
Lived in that time. You don't have to have a dime.
You don't.
In this part of the country, all you have to do is pick up the phone, get a dial tone, and the operator will make the call for you.
Lucky you at that point. Holy cow. Could you
Yeah,
imagine
you just
going, I don't have a dime?
dial zero and get the operator, But now there aren't any phone booths left,
Wow. That would have been a good thing. That would have just been...
The only phone booth left on this whole mountain is that phone booth that I was in. It's now a local monument.
That's neat. So, all right.
It doesn't work anymore.
Well, absolutely.
But it's still there because of what happened to me.
I think that's cool. I like that. Well, you right before you get to the phone booth, and how lucky is that to have that right there in front of you? And maybe they placed you there.
I think the aliens took that into consideration.
I think you're right. I mean, come on, that's no coincidence. Or if it is a coincidence, there's no
at first
coincidence.
I wondered why they didn't take me to my home, or why didn't they dump me back where they took me? But if they had taken me back to where I first saw them, I would have froze to death before I could get help. But if they tried to take me to Snowflake is in a wide, shallow valley. And any place I could have been placed that would have been within distance of getting help, they would have been in view of many, many people. But Heber is at the junction of 3 or 4 little steep-walled canyons that are like cliffs. So as soon as they were down below treetop level, down below the cliff edge, they were invisible for miles. Because, from high above, they would be able to see if there was any cars coming. And it was so late at night that there were no cars coming. So I woke up in time to see the craft leave, recognized where I was, and made my way down into town. And first thing I did with the first building I came to, I pounded and screamed, and I probably scared the hell out of whoever was in there, and they didn't come to the door. But I ran on down and found the phone booth and called my family.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Well, when you first realized you were on the ground, were you sitting? Were you laying on your back? Were you on your stomach, curled up?
I was lying face down, my head on my arm. There was a light above me. I looked to see where the light was coming from, and it went off before I could get my eyes all the way towards it. But then I could see the shiny bottom of this disc hovering there before it unlit, and then it shot into the sky.
And then at that
it
point,
stirred the air a little bit, but it was silent. None of that weird sound that it made in the woods.
And what was your thought at that point? Were you what just happened? Did you just think that it was a second from?
Where I was. I knew
did.
where I was because I've spent years in this forest, and
did you know where you have been?
I could look down into the town, recognize those lights of the town down there, and I made a beeline for that.
But did you know where you had been at that point, or no?
Oh, I remembered seeing these creatures, and I was still psychologically pretty traumatized by that. That was really, really tough. And I could barely speak when my brother put me in the truck there. I tried to tell him about what had happened, and I just couldn't really get it out. But because the conscious period I had was so brief, I thought that it was still the same night, Wednesday. It was at that point that my brother said, "Travis, feel your face. You've been gone for 5 days." And I felt 5-day growth of beard, and I looked at my watch. The date had changed. And that was an additional shock that just kind of it was the straw that finished me off. Kind of went catatonic at that point. I was in no shape to be interrogated, and my brother knew that. And his main concern, his great priority was that him checked out medically, And he was so on top of that. I guess, during the search, UFO researchers had been schooling him about things, but, he had presence of mind to save the first voided specimen of urine. He took the clothes that I was wearing and sealed them up in a bag. And decided to just take off out of town. See, the law enforcement had been so hostile that his first thought wasn't to turn to them. The main thing was to just go find a doctor. And so that's what we did. We went to his house and set about trying to hook up with doctors. And there was a quote-unquote researcher of rather dubious reputation who had recommended this member of his group. It was supposedly a medical doctor. But when we went there, it turned out he wasn't a medical doctor at all. It was so flaky, we left. But they had been telling the world that, they were the ones that were in charge of investigating the case at that point. And so when they were no longer being accepted by me and my brother was basically doing the talking for me. I was in no shape to talk to anybody. They started attacking, and that is really where the first of the drug hallucination theories came forward. This guy claimed that he was a drug expert and that he could tell that I had been hallucinating on some drug, probably LSD, he says. Well, immediately the medical tests that I had right after that proved there was no such drug in my body. Besides, what's crazy about this whole hallucination theory, whether it's the transitory psychosis theory or the drug hallucination theory or whatever, is how do 7 people have the same hallucination?
Yeah, I think they call that ayahuasca. And I don't know, did anybody check you for ayahuasca route?
What's ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca is what they do in Peru with the shamans, and then it takes you to another realm. And according to, I at least heard Graham Hancock say once.
A mushroom or something like this?
It's a root. It's a root, and they do these neat things, and people do it in California as well. But you go out into Peru, the Amazon, and you have shamans do it, and everybody. I just heard.
Of such a thing back then.
Oh no, I think they did. In
1975, I'd never heard of it.
No, well, but you weren't doing any of that stuff anyway. You were just being the redneck in Snowflake, Arizona. You weren't even thinking about Peru and all the crazy things there. But I was told by one person that everybody can see the same thing. At least I've heard that by one person. But that was just kind of throwing out the ayahuasca. But everybody's kind of trying to throw you out.
First I've ever heard of anybody claiming that everybody has the same hallucination.
Yeah, I heard that once. It was back on an old.
Well, that was my main ammunition against the idea that we were hallucinating.
Oh well, But I think only the very, 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 very few people knew about
And are
that.
these people running chainsaws that can cut your leg off in a split second?
I certainly hope not.
I don't think so, you know.
No, you just had so many people trying to say this didn't happen, it had to be this and this and this. There's no way you were taken by aliens. I mean, even
Well,
now,
I had
that
a
sounds
whole
crazy.
battery of psychiatric tests, perfectly normal pattern of scores, no sign of any such thing, you know. But they were really looking for that hallucination theory. There was even a theory that there was some sort of an electrical discharge from the ground, a seismic lightning sort of a thing that had passed through me and caused the hallucination. What else? Transitory psychosis, drug hallucination. Well, there was one other.
That still angers you to this day, doesn't it?
Well, you know, every bit of evidence you could possibly have of a scientific nature refutes these theories.
Well, you know what's bad about that?
What about the physical evidence at the site?
True. And
does ayahuasca cause the trees to grow differently? Does it leave magnetic readings? Does it leave radiation? I don't think so.
No, and what's bad about it is it really takes away you being able to look back and tell this incredible story where years later you look at it and think that, hey, they saved your life. And it takes away from you being able to tell this incredible, fantastic story from top to bottom, you know, from beginning to end in a wonderful, magical, incredible, blow your mind, wonderful way, because you see them as, hey, they saved my life because I was being a little cocky that night. And it takes that away because along the way you have to prove, along the way to these people, you know, here's the fact, here's the fact, here's the fact. And you know what? Here on Blue Rock Talk, you don't have to do that. I want you to tell your story from your heart. These people, these skeptics, I hope one day that they run into an ET.
What we have here is inconsistent standards of proof.
I know.
Dr. Harder made the observation that if you had 6 people say that they had witnessed a murder, that's sufficient in American court of law to convict somebody and give them the death penalty. Mm-hmm. And the jury wouldn't look back twice. If you had 6 witnesses without polygraph tests, but these guys all passed lie detector tests too, that would have been sufficient evidence in that circumstance. Right. But suddenly, when it's something what they call supernatural, it's not supernatural, it's quite natural. But suddenly, the standard is so much greater, and this can't possibly be. And so what would be sufficient to deprive somebody of their life in an American court of law, in our justice system, as finely tuned as it can be, suddenly it's not enough. And it's something I have to accept, that as long as I live, people are going to want more proof than what you would expect in a death penalty case. Yeah.
But I just hope that you can stop thinking about all that, even though I know it's hard. I mean, I get these trolls every day, and it sticks with me, so I can imagine what happens with you. And I just wish
evidence after evidence after evidence, you know. Tracy Torme, who wrote the script, when he confronts skeptics, he goes with a list of facts. How do you explain this?
Excellent.
If you're going to explain this away, how do you explain this and this and this and this and this? And, it gets pretty patchworky when they have to start explaining things. Yeah. You know, what about the fact that these trees nearest where the craft was changed? You know, I did an interview here a while back with Rob Lowe. Yeah.
How'd that go?
Yeah, it was. They were fun. It was very lighthearted. They were just out checking out paranormal type stuff, and they weren't looking real deep at the research. But when they went to air the episode, he said, because it was a 2-parter. After me was this lady that something about lightning. So he said, Travis told me that the aliens were in the area mining for fulgurite. And I go, huh?
What?
I never said that. What's fulgurite? So I went online and looked it up and found out what it is, but I'd never heard of it before.
What is it, a rock?
Yeah, it's a rock. It's a mineral, but it's unique in that it's formed when lightning strikes the ground, and there's millions of volts and millions of degrees of temperature melt all these crystals together in a sort of a branching, sort of a lightning bolt shaped sort of form. And these crystals, these minerals are sold at gem shows. They're supposed to have special properties. But the Mogollon Rim right there has the highest frequency of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States outside of the Everglades. And you're not going to get fulgurite in the Everglades because it's a swamp. But so when the lightning strikes the ground, it's forming these minerals. And, I thought, hey, I'd never heard of it, but that's plausible. Maybe cool. That's what they were doing there.
Yeah.
And maybe this blast of energy that that came from the craft had something to do with that. The crew said it resembled lightning. That's the kind of research that's ongoing to figure out what they were doing there and all that sort of thing. But explain that. Explain this whole thing. Follow-up research to the site, discovering alterations in the growth of the trees. Now, initially, we went back with Paramount to do some promotional work for the movie, and Mike was being interviewed there too, and he never said nothing to me, but I found out later that he went back after the snow melted. It was pretty deep snow, and I thought maybe our problem finding the site was because it was 2.5 feet of snow on the ground, But he had noticed that the trees were bigger than they should have been, close to where the craft had come down. So he went and he took a little core sample to the center of this tree, and he could see, counting, there's pictures of this in my book. I could even I'll hold that picture up if you want.
Yeah, sure.
And he could see that counting back, at the time that we were there with the film crew, 15 years had gone by, and the growth rings of the tree
I remember that.
had abruptly become very much thicker. I don't know if the lighting's good enough to show this.
Hold on, hold on a second. Hold it up there. Let me get a closer shot of you there. Okay. And hold it there just.
You can see that the outer 15 years, you get one growth ring for each year with a tree, and they became so much thicker very abruptly. For 85 years, those tree rings were fairly uniform, and then suddenly they're very, very much thicker.
I see it. That's pretty incredible. That's there's another fact right there.
Went with that.
You can't make up that.
You can't make up that. But there's still somebody who's going to say, well, maybe they went out there every year for 15 years and watered the trees or something. But a follow-up expedition found that this effect was not uniform on the tree. The core sample that Mike took just happened to be on the side of the tree towards where the craft had been. When a forest fire killed the trees in the area, we could get a full cross-section and discovered that this rapid growth thickening of the tree rings was predominantly on the side of the tree towards where the craft had come down. And so whether it was north, east, south, west, around in a circle, there was no geological connection with the thickened rings. There was the one common denominator on the thickened side, and that was where the craft had been. And every one of them, 15 years back, had this bulging, and then on the back side, were almost completely normal. Now,
Wow.
The head of the expedition was Ben Hansen, the host of Fact or Fake.
Yeah.
And he did some online research and discovered that the pine trees in the vicinity of the Chernobyl nuclear accident had accelerated growth. And, that was interesting to me because you would expect radiation to just kill living things.
Yeah.
But in the case of at least pine trees, it stimulates a more rapid growth, at least a thickened rings that somebody was theorizing that maybe it's some kind of like a scar tissue or some kind of a healing process. It thickens up in order to compensate for damage from the radiation. Right. But those Scots pine trees in the vicinity of Chernobyl also exhibited this effect. So that's corroboration for the Geiger counter readings that the searchers were making during the search for me before I was returned.
When you went there,
again, the skeptics, you have to say, how do you explain this away?
When you went back there, was that the first time with the crew? Was that the first time you went back after the incident?
It was really hard for me to do. But
yeah, what was that like?
I remember them describing it as it was with a news crew from the state of Arizona, and they compared it to shell shock or battle fatigue. They didn't have the term PTSD then, but I was in pretty bad shape, and it was pretty rough just to be there.
Was it because of what happened to you, or was it because that night, or was it what happened all those years
memory
later?
of it and the fear of the whole situation, regaining consciousness and feeling injured, mortally wounded actually, to feel trapped at the same time you feel like you're dying, and in the presence of creatures that just so different that it was terrifying. And it took me so many years to get over that, to the point where I could even start questioning the idea that this was a quote unquote abduction and more of an ambulance call than an abduction.
So let's go to that part. Let's do that. If you're just now tuning in, this is Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis. Hi, everybody. I'm Connie Willis, and we're with Travis Walton. He's talking about his story. And it's a doozy. Please hit like if you are liking what's going on. Subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Be a part of the show. We'll be letting you ask some questions later on. But we're just now getting into, let's start there. What you remember, the first thing you remember about being inside, and what went through your mind till the very end, if you can go through that part. And did you remember this stuff, or was it through regression and hypnosis that you learned some of this stuff?
The hypnosis was necessary because I was just so traumatized that I had not told the entire story to my brother or the sheriff. I just sketched it out to him because I couldn't, quote, go there in that kind of detail. So the hypnotist, the main accomplishment there was to sort of, to a high degree, separate the emotion that I felt in connection with that to just a more dispassionate description of the events. But it was still extremely, extremely fearful. And it was that way for many years. It was only like 4 or 5 years ago that I made a conscious effort to connect emotionally to what I understood intellectually, because, I gradually came to the conclusion that, the idea that they were just, unconcerned about my welfare or were in some way just trying to see what pain does to humans or something like that was not the case. That they were concerned enough about my welfare that they made sure I got where I could, I was returned where I could get help.
Absolutely.
And all of that, and then the fear that I had that, there would be some residual health effects, that, there could be something that would cause a lot of misery or sickness or something as a result of this experience.
You never had that, did you?
No, I didn't. It didn't materialize. And
it could
gradually over time.
It could be the fact that you lived through it and you have to tell it every day for the rest of your life. That could have been the only negative about it. That's your life.
I had some extensive medical surveys and watched it carefully, but I never wanted to even talk about that aspect of it publicly, until I could prove it. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until I could go in and get the printout from my employers to prove that I never called in sick for 40 years that I could comment that there were no negative health effects and possibly even positive effects. Now, I've always tried to live a healthy life, so, the skeptics would say that was all there was to it. But at least I can document that I never missed a day of work. Not many people can say that.
No, I wish we could just totally get the skeptics out of something that just happened.
I think it's
so wonderful. It's just fantastic.
It's not negative to bring that in. It's that people need to hear, okay, it was attacked this way, and then it was totally disproved this way.
No, I get
like
that.
Like the skeptic that say, I was never in Hebrew, I was never in the phone booth, that I was in some cabin somewhere. Well, that theory is completely blown out of the water by the fact that there was proof that the phone call came from that phone booth.
Yeah, right.
But never mind that fact.
Right.
The operator turned right around after I made that call, and she listened in on it and reported it to the sheriff, directly to the sheriff. And so he sent somebody out there in response to her report. So never mind the facts, it spoiled a great theory,
I know.
This in a cabin somewhere doesn't jive with the fact that the phone call came from the phone booth. So every theory that people desperate to explain it away comes up short.
That's right.
Because it's contradicted by basic facts of the matter.
Yes,
and,
but here's my point in all
that's
that.
The reason to bring up these ridiculous theories is to show that they've been disproved.
I get it, and you need to do that for sure. But what bothers me is when all those things happen constantly, all it does is keep us from going into. It keeps us at 101. Was it real or not? Was it real or not? Is he telling the truth or not? It keeps us stuck at 101, and we don't get deeper into it. However, you yourself went deeper because years later, that's where you said, "Wait a minute."
Yeah, what are they doing there? Can we what can we find out about these radiation readings, these magnetic readings, the follow-up measurements that were taken, the fulgurite idea? We went back and looked at mineral surveys and other kinds of magnetic surveys of the area, all that kind of stuff. The kind of stuff that they should have been thinking about instead of trying to find some way to explain it all away.
That's right. And that's what I'm missing out on. And all the people that believe you or maybe are still wondering if they believe you and that are listening tonight, it's those people out there that they deserve as well as people not even on the fence but maybe learning something new, to hear what happened first and think for themselves and go deeper. Oh, well, why would that happen? Why would they be here? What did Travis do? Is he really, maybe everybody saw this happen, but it happens to him all the time, but this time he had his guys around when it happened, because there's all sorts of different theories and thoughts, as you know.
Well, but, as you know,
we can't get deeper into it when that's
in the paranormal, as it is in politics, people's opinions are ruled by what they want to be true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, right now, the president has an ex-girlfriend who is going to take a lie detector test to prove that she's telling the truth, right?
Oh, I missed
well,
that.
You know that the people who want to believe her are going to say, yay, polygraph at that point.
Yeah.
Now, the people who don't want to believe her are going to say, well, polygraph's not 100%. And that's the way opinions about polygraph happen.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Polygraph is used by the FBI and the CIA to screen their own people.
Yes.
They use it themselves. Now, if they didn't believe it, if they didn't believe that these things could be properly and carefully administered and give them useful information, they wouldn't be doing it.
That's right. How many did you take?
At the time that the crew passed, the president of the American Polygraph Association said that although no one test is 100%, it's still in the 90th, upper 90 percentiles.
Okay.
But when the sixth crewman passed, the president of the American Polygraph Association, the odds would be 1,000,000 to 1 of there being any kind of an error because these, the cross-linking like that. I personally have passed 5 separate tests from 3 different examiners of the highest caliber. These are people, interrogation specialists with years of law enforcement experience. The last test I took had done work for the Albuquerque Police Department, the New Mexico State Prison, and even the United States Marshals. And so these 5 tests, all 100%.
Okay.
The cumulative number of tests is 16 tests, all in connection with the same incident,
Well, there's somewhere out there it says that you took one that failed. Is that true or false?
That's not a real test. That was a phony, fraudulent television show that all of the top polygraph experts, before I was ever on the show, were attacking the show, saying you could not get an accurate test out of this. Flipping a coin would be more accurate.
That's where
there was a group of polygraph experts, court-recognized polygraph experts, called Global Polygraph. And they were attacking this show as fraudulent, saying you couldn't possibly get accurate results because they violated every single rule of proper polygraph procedure.
Oh, so you did take one on TV, and then that's what happened?
No, they claimed that but this guy was a fraud.
Okay.
And he
Imagine that.
You see, you get $1 million prize for winning, but he made sure that nobody ever passed because he's trying to save his employers money. He has a vested interest in making sure everybody on the show flunks the test.
Right.
But the top experts in the world, the people who
it matters,
write the textbooks on polygraph, are saying totally worthless, zero, zilch.
Wow.
And like I said, before I was ever on the show, Global Polygraph Organization was trying to make everybody realize that was a totally fraudulent show.
You're watching Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis. I'm Connie Willis. Our guest tonight is Travis Walton, Fire in the Sky. Tomorrow night, Bigfoot Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern. We have Saturday night, I'll be on Coast to Coast AM, and that's going to be with Samantha Ellen Ritchie and the Little People, 4 friends that she has found in the forest. And we also have Jerry Wills, who's going to be on. He's a healer, adventurer. He does all sorts of things. He's going to be the feature guest. And then on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, here on Blue Rock Talk, it's Stan's Bible Lecture. I think you'll enjoy that too. It's live and you can ask questions. So back to Travis live here. If you like the show, please hit like and please subscribe if you haven't done that already. And welcome to the new Blue Rockers that are here, because Blue Rock Talk, Earth's most interesting conversations, people, places, and things. If you subscribe, you're called a Blue Rocker. And all that is someone that's in the know. And you can do this when you see another Blue Rocker. Can you do that, Travis? Are you going to be a Blue Rocker with me? You can.
There we go.
Oh, put a fire. There you go. He can do it. That was easy and innate. You're a natural. Okay. So you can do the fish across the screen. It's a backward spot.
Leonard Nimoy?
Yeah.
Let long and prosper or something like that.
Right. That's right. It's a backwards hymn, right? And then kind of angled. It's real comfortable. It just kind of evolved into a Blue Rock Talk. It's kind of cool. So...
Well, and by the way, Leonard Nimoy was interviewed about what he thought of UFOs, and he looked back on his time with me. He spent half a day with me, and he said on the basis of that, I felt he was being truthful. This, this is not a polygraph test, but this is an actor, and he certainly can tell if somebody's lying. But Newsweek did a commemorative issue after he passed away, and my picture with him on the set was in there.
Oh.
And,
he must have been pretty cool to meet, huh?
Yeah, he was cool. Yeah, it was so cool to meet him.
Yeah, he's one of the greats for sure.
It's kind of an interesting coincidence, if that's what it is, that another member of the crew owns property here. George Takei, he played Sulu.
Right.
He owns property here.
Oh, that is interesting.
My family worked in the restaurant where he came, and they served him. And I also ran into him at an autograph signing in Atlanta. But who else did I meet? Oh, William Shatner invited me to be on his talk show. But before that happened, the show got canceled.
Oh, bummer.
He was at that same autograph signing that where George Takei was. And so was one of the cast of Fire in the Sky was there. He was there for some other sci-fi movie.
Well, these celebrity, a lot of people want to meet celebrities along the way. And, you are a celebrity.
It's kind of strange to have celebrities treat me like a celebrity.
I know,
I
know, but people see you as that,
me.
Right? But and I guess my question is, what about these celebrities from movies and television? How many wanted to, meet you that you've met along the way that said, I wanted to meet you?
There's been quite a few who, some that just went out of their way to meet me or contact me. Aside from, being on a show where they were too and that sort of thing. But I thought what was really curious was this. I'll show you. You see right here?
Get a big shot of you here so we can see it.
This is a T-shirt they sent me. This is a band in the UK called the Travis Waltons.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. They sing about you.
Yeah. They got a song and,
they've got videos of you, don't they?
Aaron Paul does a cameo for him on YouTube for their show, he was the star of Breaking Bad.
Yeah, you showed me that a long time ago.
I contacted them and they said, yeah, we named the band after you. And I'm saying, why?
That was so cool. They're cool people. I remember you sending me that stuff.
It's kind of strange.
Oh, that was really cool. Who was the favorite celebrity that you met that wanted to meet you?
Oh, boy. Bunch of them. Well, professional athlete called, I wasn't home. There's been so many. Let's see.
What was your top person? The one you went, holy cow, they wanted to meet me.
Well, I probably shouldn't
come
talk
on. Tell us your heart. Come on.
I met a lot of great people,
Oh, look at it touching you. See, that's the real Travis Walton right there, everybody. He's a touching man. And, just the little times I've met him and talked with him, here he is, a real guy, just soft-hearted. That's why, you were this punk before, cocky little kid, but look what you are. I mean, the real you when you're away from your story. It's just, I found you to be true, genuine, and it was only a short amount of time, really, that I even had that time with you, and other people were around. It was at some convention, some conference somewhere, I think up in Philly, and that's the real you, and that's what I like to meet is the real you.
I'm just me, and I try not to,
You are.
One thing, early on, Dr. Harder put me on the phone with Betty Hill. And she had one little bit of advice, and it really probably, helped me along. My own tendency was to don't let that go to your head. Anybody who thinks that kind of attention means anything,
no.
The minute you start thinking like that, you're a fool, because I'm just me.
Yeah, you are. You are. So let's get back to you and tell us what you saw. And don't worry about the debunkers here, but tell us what you saw when you were inside, taken away.
Well, I came to really slowly. I was in a great deal of pain. And just the fact that I felt there was something very wrong inside contributed greatly to the whole effect of suddenly looking into the face of this creature. You know, the association of this fear, this feeling, this unease that something's terribly wrong inside, and then to be seeing this face, you associate them and connect them. And so I interpreted it as mortally threatening, and probably incorrectly, that they were probably actually in the process of trying to revive me. And there was an instrument across my chest, whether that was diagnostic or therapeutic, I don't know. It was nothing I would recognize. But I was immediately combative and doing my best to get away from them and keep them away from me. Now, the theory that they have mind control, there's probably something to that, you know, based on all these reports that other people have. But I'm thinking, well, why weren't they able to subdue me, get me under control? And I'm thinking that this blast of energy hitting me in the head had disrupted the neural circuits in a way where even the three of them combining their force were unable to subdue me. And in support of that theory was that brainwave scan, the EEG that I had immediately upon returning. Now, the doctor was a member of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, but in order to avoid drawing undue attention to the test, when I was put into the hospital to do this brainwave scan, I was put in under an assumed name. So the technicians did not know who I was or what had happened to me. So their discovery of these anomalous wave patterns are much more significant and reliable. It's called a double-blind test, where they're basically not being affected by any sort of reports from me or anything that they'd heard. So that backs up the theory that somehow that blast of energy had disturbed the brain circuitry in a way where they were not able to assert control in that way. And they're fleeing the scene. I mean, it was pretty useless. I was combative and physically much stronger than them, even in a weakened state.
What did you see? Were they grays? Were they human looking?
Well, you can call them grays if you want, but they didn't have those terms back then.
Right.
Nobody called them grays. They were just small, bald creatures with huge eyes, you know.
Okay.
And I think a lot of these descriptions that they call grays are probably a number of different species of similar looking creatures. And people just lump them all together because they're small, bald creatures with big eyes. But
were yours all small, or was it a variation? Small, tall.
They were very short. Yeah, they were small, shorter than 4 feet.
Okay.
I think one description that I've heard so much is that these black obsidian eyes, that does not fit in with what I saw. I saw eyes with a pupil, an iris, eyelids that blinked. However, it was dimly lit in there, and I know that, in trying to deduct what the conditions they might have come from, anywhere you have creatures on the earth that have huge eyes, they come from a very low light environment. They're either nocturnal, or they live in a cave,
right,
or under the deep sea. So very low light environment. So the low light in the craft that I awoke in was probably more consistent with a normal light level for them. Might have been quite bright for them,
right,
just to help out with the work they were doing. But it might be that the so-called grays that are supposedly have a black glass-like solid eye, it could be some sort of an appliance similar to sunglasses.
Yeah.
To defend their eyes against what we would consider normal light levels would be blindingly bright for a creature with eyes that large.
Yeah, I could agree with that too.
I've had 40 years to think about, how.
Yes, you have.
Form has to have something to do with
right.
the conditions they. It was only this last year I got to thinking, people keep thinking of them as being unemotional, as being mechanical in their thinking, like they've lost all emotion. But I thought, well, if they have telepathy with each other, they do not need to express emotion with facial expressions. That would be totally redundant. They can communicate to each other and communicate with a richness of emotion far more in depth and nuanced than anything that we can come up with by raising an eyebrow, curling a lip, or whatever it is that humans do that make us think we're emotional and they're not. They could be much more feeling than we are. And the fact that they're telepathic makes them much more caring and feeling than you might assume. The whole idea that they're robotic has to do with the fact that they don't use facial muscles at all to convey what's going on inside.
And well, a lot of people also...
It's just my own thinking.
It's right. And a lot of people think that the grays, or the little tiny ones, are kind of like the taxi cabs of the universe, and they're the worker bees of the universe too. So
I think they get that reputation by being unemotional, unexpressive in the face, but might be undeserved. There might be some mistaken thinking. A lot more going on there. A very large cranium is not there just to be some kind of a drone. Come on.
Well, so you're later, you're starting to fight with them, right? So how did that go? Did they
gave up, fled the scene. And then the very next being that I encounter is a human looking being, that I've had a plethora of theories about how in the world you would have a human-looking being that's not an actual human. Now, I mistook them for being humans. I thought maybe they were from the Air Force or some rescue mission of some kind, but subsequent things made me reject that theory. But one of the things, again, here we go back to the skeptics. They're saying there's no way even grays could exist. They're saying if there was an alien creature, it's going to look like a giant cockroach or an octopus or something. Anything with 2 arms and 2 legs and eyes in the front, human arrangement features. Oh, the coincidence would be astronomically unlikely. No, you don't understand biology. Form follows function, even in our own biosphere. Everything that comes to live in the sea, comes to live in the water, comes to look like a fish, even if it's taxonomically in a whole different category. If it's a bird or a mammal or a reptile or an amphibian, they all look very fish-like. 2 little fins in the front and 1 big one in the back, because that's what works. Now, in the case of a tool-using creature that's going to build machinery that's going to carry you across the universe, it's going to look human-like, because that's the kind of being that's going to make things. Tool users are going to be bipedal and two hands, and that's fundamental biology. The insistence that they would have to look like a cockroach or something even more bizarre, something tentacled or any of that kind of stuff. Are they really expecting that to be something that comes to a very, very sophisticated use of tools? Possible, but, it could be that the ones who look the most like us take the greatest interest in us. Similarity in form may make them much more curious about us and what we're doing here. And
we may be related.
And we could be related. We could have been planted here years ago. That's a popular theory. And they've been watching ever since. I believe time travel and space travel would be closely related. Just what I hear with theoretical physics and again, skeptics saying it's too far. They couldn't come that far. It'd take too long. They don't understand science that's going to be, they're trying to say what's possible and what's not possible.
There's other things we just don't know. There's just things we don't know, which make me go back to taking you to these humans that you say they look like humans, but then something made you realize they're not. So what was that?
That the Greys came up with, whipped up some sort of a robot or a cycle, mind control illusion or something that would just be less threatening in my perception, just because they would look closer to my form and I would,
you would accept
react violently and be more cooperative. But it's also possible they just summoned the help from a more human-looking creature because it's somebody that I'm not going to fight like I was fighting them, and my life depended on cooperating so that the medical repairs could continue.
You didn't know that at the time, though.
Well, I certainly felt mortally wounded, and at that point that I cooperated with the human-looking ones.
Well, when you saw them, were you like, oh, hey, thank you, hey, what's going on?
Oh, yeah. I immediately took it to be a rescue. You want to go with me? Even though he's not answering my questions, I thought, well, maybe it's just because he's wearing this helmet and he can't hear me or talk with it on. Yeah, and so I went with him.
A human with a helmet?
Just a clear glass helmet. To me, that suggests that there could have been some contamination problem with.
Oh, it was around his head.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or something to do with an improper atmosphere inside of that craft, contributing to the weakened feeling that I had. I had the feeling of something terribly wrong inside, but I was cooperative up until they started to try to get me to lay down on the table, and then he had help from other human-looking beings who were not wearing helmets and had no excuse not to reply, and they weren't answering, so I became alarmed with the idea that maybe this wasn't a rescue. Of course, I think now that it was just important for me to become anesthetized and so they could continue medical treatment. But at that time, I was fighting them, trying to resist, and they knocked me out of some sort of gas. And
put it over your face or blow it on you?
A mask.
The gas, a mask?
Yeah, gas. Just looked like a medical one. Well, it didn't have a tube connected to it that I could see, but a clear mask. And I immediately tried to pull it away, but I lost consciousness before I could. And that was the last conscious memory until I awoke, lying beside the highway, looked up, saw the craft take off into the sky.
Well, before they put you out with the mask, were you able to walk around the ship at all? Did you realize it was a ship? What did that look like?
It was very cramped, very claustrophobic, dimly lit. And, I was just hell-bent on escape, and it was irrational. I was hysterical, but I had the idea that if I just opened a door, I could just drop 15 feet to the ground and be back in the woods. And in hindsight, I was probably no longer in the woods, but that was the thinking I had at the time. So it's probably fortunate I was unable to open a door.
When you were walking around like that, were they allowing you to at that point, or were they trying to chase you down?
I was afraid they were after me, but when they fled from my threatening gestures, like I said, I'm physically a danger to them if they can't control me, and I'm seeing them as a threat. So they, although I was afraid they were coming back, they were probably doing their best to avoid me, because there would be no way I was going to cooperate with these, what you call grays. And then when this human-looking individual came in, took me out of the craft into another area where they knocked me out.
Did they ever talk to you, telepathy-wise? Did you get communication, or it was just you talking to them?
It's just me battling like a maniac, but you got to understand, the telepathy wasn't working. If they had that, then it wouldn't have been necessary. They could have kept me subdued and kept me unconscious and continued the medical treatments. The whole idea was that, this is out of control here.
When you see any video, or maybe even in person, because you've been out in the woods, when you see a wild animal, just a little tiny one, let's just say a little tiny one, big ones too, but let's say a little tiny animal, wild animal, never seen a human before, and it gets cornered somehow, somewhere from a human, it's cornered, and it's just freaking out because it's seeing a human for the first time too, and it's scared to death, and it can't get loose. If you see that now, do you kind of feel like you can relate to that?
Yeah, that's you can understand, you can relate. It's a natural reaction. Inappropriate. You might be trying to help it. I've seen animals that were tangled up in a fence or in some other way, had a problem I was trying to help. It did not understand. It was trying to help.
That's true. That's true. That's true. I remember before you had said that if you could change that day for it never to happen again, you would. Do you still feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. I wish it had never happened. Second to that, if I couldn't keep it from ever happening, keep it from ever being known publicly. And if, people say, what about it happening again? And I would say, hell no, except if I could have some of my questions answered,
What are some of those questions?
Oh, man, you lose count of them, Of course, their intentions, I'm assuming in saying that I don't believe they're malevolent. I believe that their intentions with humans are benevolent. And I can go on and on. I've had, like I said, 42 years to think about what is their agenda.
What have you concluded?
Well, as primitive as our technology is, I can hold up my cell phone here and say, the NSA knows where every one of these is. So it's no big stretch to say that the aliens know where we are. It's not like, oh, dang, humans spotted us again. We need to be more careful about this. I believe that when the humans make a sighting or make contact, it's no accident. It's quite deliberate. It's quite planned. It's under control. And I think they're as capable of identifying us as individuals as the NSA is to identify these little devices right here. And they know where each one is.
So you think yours was planned? Or you think it was just So you think yours was planned?
I used to just scoff at that idea. I used to think that people would think that the aliens are actually, they'll describe their sighting and they'll say, I did this, and then the craft reacted this way. And I think, oh, come on. We're just an anthill, and they're just passing by. We're insignificant to them. I used to think that, but now I think they recognize each and every one of the people who see them. It's planned. The people who never see one, that's planned too. But again, the debunkers say, well, if there was anything to this, they would land on the White House lawn and say, here we are, Mr. President. They're not doing that. But I believe with their technology, they're capable of doing everything they're doing here and remaining undetected. It's not some, oh, dang, accidental, got seen by the humans again, It's a process of, with purpose. I think it's a conditioning process, primarily, but much more subtle, much more varied in the purpose than just that. That over time, that people can come to accept the idea that we're not alone in the universe, without it being a wowie zowie sort of a fantastical crashing in on your life and turning the world upside down. Eventually it needs to be where people can simply accept this and take it in stride. They're just, when I say this, people seem kind of disappointed, but just think of them as those people from way over there that we don't know too much about. We're a long ways from taking that sort of an attitude about it. But it's got to be that, or they're not going to do it, because otherwise it's going to be destructive. The disclosure, the abrupt announce it to the world tomorrow push, is something that people don't realize would be destructive. Just the idea that zero free energy could be available tomorrow would literally cause the death of millions. And you don't understand that the world economy is based on petrodollars? You can't jerk the rug out from underneath people overnight like that. Are they going to continue to want to pay $2.50 at the pump for fuel? If it be free, the demand would immediately be, give us the technology. And, the aliens are wise in that you're not going to hand the children a box of matches and say, go play. Humans are way too undeveloped to be entrusted with that kind of technology. Not that it's any threat to the aliens, it's a threat to us. So it's really out of consideration to us that they're not showing themselves to any different degree than they are.
I think it's up to them for disclosure. I don't think it's up for us. I think
it's
up to
gathering
them.
momentum. It's happening. The military coming forward with some videos, and it's and again, the evil alien theorists, try to act like the fact that they're secretive automatically indicates that they have some sinister purpose. But like I say, they're capable of doing everything and not being detected at all.
I think you can be secretive
and the same
without being
thing on the part of our government. People act like the government are playing some kind of dirty, nefarious game because they won't tell us what they know. Because of our military surveillance and the thoroughness of the investigation of these things, the military and the government does know more than we know. But they're as wise as the aliens are in not just, throwing this to the public and let the consequences be damned. It's, again, even the motivation on the part of the government doesn't necessarily mean anything sinister, that they're not in cahoots with the aliens to take over the planet or anything like that. It's just not in our best interest to have that kind of open acknowledgement at this point. And, when we talk about the reaction that people had to me and the crew and some of the emotional extreme reactions that I've witnessed, drives home to me that, that assessment that we're not ready yet is accurate. But at the same time, that's what motivates me to continue to talk about this, to get us ready.
Yeah.
Just accept this. It's real. That's all.
Yeah, the truth is not
out
there. It's here.
I'm not here for shock and awe. I'm here to say, come on, it's just regular stuff.
This is it. Natural.
And way back when this happened, they had a thing called the Drake equation, but they had no idea what numbers to fill in. They wondered, would every star in 1,000 have planets, or But now, just this last year or so, NASA, on the basis of direct observation, says virtually every star has about a dozen planets. And so therefore, the numbers that you plug into the Drake equation are astronomically, no pun intended, greater than anybody ever thought. The number of civilizations just in our galaxy, let alone those other millions of galaxies, is so much greater than anybody could imagine, and so much older than anybody ever thought. The astrophysicist Michio Kaku said people keep envisioning these civilizations as being maybe a few hundred years ahead of us. Based on the age of these star systems, they could be literally millions or billions of years ahead of us. You can't sit there and declare what's possible, unquote, and impossible. That's astonishingly arrogant. You can point to the great minds of the past, the great scientists making pronouncements about what's impossible. I give the example of Lord Kelvin, I think it was, saying man would never travel faster than 60 miles an hour because the air would be drawn out of the conveyance and the occupants would suffocate.
Right.
The Kelvin temperature scale was named after him. He was one of the great minds of his day, but he's not qualified to be saying what's possible in the future.
So go with me here for a minute. Here you are talking about constellations, suns, stars, different equations along the way, things that you would have never thought you would have such a passion about. And it's coming out of you, that passion. The passion to prove what happened to you. The passion, having all these facts constantly ready to go, to be able to take that stand with the skeptics that are going to push you. All that. It's amazing.
It's not so much to say, hey, I'm not the crazy.
No, I get it.
No, it's about educating people to, hey, just take this in stride.
No, I get it. Go with me. I get it. And I'm enjoying it. It's great to hear all this stuff because it does make people feel more confident in your story that may not be. I love it. I'm there. Okay. So in hearing all this stuff is fantastic. However, do you ever stop and get away all the proof and get away of all the ways to prove it and so that you're not this nut or anything, or it doesn't matter. Do you ever stop and just lay on the grass, look up at the clouds and go, wow, I got one of the experiences that millions and millions of people would have loved to have had. Maybe not as, where you were hurt and that part of it, but you saw a full-size ship. You were taken in. You saw things that no one else sees, and then they brought you back and you were able to experience and tell people, what happened. And now you feel they saved your life because you went and toward it, boom, got knocked out. They said, holy cow, well, let's pull you back up here and take care of this human. And they fixed you and then dropped you back down, kind of thing. That's an incredible thing, Travis. Do you ever stop and go,
yeah, to the old Travis, that's just totally amazing. It's a mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah,
but, in order to cope with the reality, this is real. This happened. Yeah. I have to just say it. It's just one of those things. And my mission is to just help people understand for them that, yeah.
But you still feel the joy, though, once in a while, right? Or did you ever have joy or a miraculous feeling? Did you ever get that?
Well, the whole gamut of emotions, everything, including a bit of a sadness about what we're depriving ourselves of by being closed-minded. Mm-hmm. And to see that kind of closed-mindedness manifest itself in the news of the day, the social problems, the politics, and that kind of limited thinking, people don't know how to judge what's real and what's not. They first decide what they want to believe, and then they gather the facts that they think will support what they already decided they want to believe. Now, they got it backwards. I'd just like to tell the public, please gather the facts and then see where those facts direct them, what belief that takes them to. You know, that's a good place to start, you know, kind of fundamental thing. Don't begin with a belief, begin with gathering the facts and try to develop a skill. Just a minute now, is that a fact or not? How do I know what's a fact? You know, it's real easy to grab at rumors. You know, there's plenty of rumors to refute everything I've said here, you know.
And, you know, it's what you're taught, too. Right? It's what Mom and Dad taught you, too, and Uncle Betsy and, you know, or Aunt Betsy and Uncle Joe. You know, it's what they've told you along the way as you've grown up as well. You know, you got to get that out of your mind of what they taught you, too. And you got to think for yourself. You just have to stop and think and feel, too. Use all your senses, you know.
Each of us needs to decide that their primary allegiance is to the truth, whatever that is, rather than a truth as prescribed to them by anybody. Even people you care about, people who shame you or appeal to your conscience or your prejudice or whatever. None of that matters. The most important thing in living is to know what's real and to learn how to do that. And that ought to be the primary mission of our educational system, is to teach people how to get away from personal bias like that, stop looking at the world through the lens of what do I want to be true, and just openly and honestly looking around and saying, I want to know what is true, whatever, you know. And not that I'm uncritical in my thinking. You need to be hypercritical in your thinking, but in a fair-minded, balanced, logical kind of way. When I was in high school, it used to be required that you couldn't graduate from high school without a civics class, basic thing they called American government or something. And now we see our news people doing man in the street interviews and going up and showing somebody a picture of our vice president or somebody like that. Who's that? I don't know. And they don't have a clue, you know. They have a hypothetical situation. And should we silence people who say things we don't agree with? Oh yeah. Something as fundamental as the First Amendment, and they don't have a clue. They really think that their primary responsibility is.
It's sad because they're comedy bits now. You know, those are comedy bits.
So it's the funny man in the street. You know, aren't people dumb kind of a thing. Well, we ought to go back to, you know, just some basic understanding of the system we live under, but. Beyond that, I think you shouldn't be able to graduate high school without having a simple, basic course in critical thinking. Just logic. You know, there's no political axe to grind. There's no belief system to accept allegiance to one thing. The truth, not a truth.
Absolutely. If we did that, the entire world would change. All our decision making would be right. Because when you don't live an authentic life in yourself, if you're not authentic in yourself on your journey, well, you're gonna do all the wrong things along the way. If you follow authenticity, you're gonna be
and how is this different
on rocks and not sand?
How is that different from somebody who's lost their mind and lives in an imaginary world and they're out of touch with reality? You create for yourself a whole system of beliefs that you created just because of your prejudices. You want to believe negative things about that group or positive things about this group. You just decided what to believe. You're as guilty of giving yourself a fantasy life as a person who's completely deranged.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know what? That goes back, Travis, to something that you said earlier. And you can't throw this out. When you were on the ship, you said you had a bad feeling you still got to trust your soul, because your soul was saying, hey, run, this is scary. So you don't know totally exactly what it was all about, but you still got to trust that. Don't take that away. It doesn't mean that they were bad. Who knows what it means, but still trust your soul, that your soul was saying,
well, what I
get out
think
of
now
here.
is that I was injured, and
you're seeing something that's
course,
not supposed to exist.
What is, what isn't.
It is what it is. Well, I don't think you would have come to those thoughts at this time in your life without experiencing something like that. So I'm all for the Travis. You're watching Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis. Let's go ahead and take some quick questions. I don't want to take too much of your time, Travis, but can we get to questions now? Is that cool with you? You okay
Sure.
for some time? All right. All right. It's always great. I'm so glad we worked it out. Remember last week, this time we couldn't get the Skype working?
Yeah, we had some technical obstacles.
Your son came to the rescue. Okay, so Blue Rockers out there, if you want to ask Travis a question, please put it in caps, and I'll check that out. I know you're about a minute or two behind with the time lapse, so I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. They're definitely talking amongst themselves, Travis. And what is the worst thing about this? Is it the fact that it happened, or the fact that you have all these skeptics and haters? What's the worst part?
Well, I just feel it's my mission to push back against them, but not, I could care less about defending myself against people who think I'm crazy or lying, That whole aspect of it is, so what? If you're going to judge me on the basis of, without resorting to the facts, I quote Emerson in the first pages of my book. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of, Ralph Waldo Emerson made an observation that many, many thinking people have seen over the years, that, I can't let myself be too troubled by people whose lives are ruled by ignorance in that way. However, I'm not ignoring it. I'm not going to turn my back on it. My mission is to deal with it in a constructive way.
You mean the one time I take a drink, you get quiet over there on the other side?
No longer to punch somebody out for calling me crazy or liar.
Did you ever punch anybody out for that? Because you were a redneck dude. Did you ever have to punch some people out for that?
I've been in some fights, but not over that.
Okay, all right. I had to ask that. You're like this cowboy. Well, let me say this about Southern people. Where I grew up here in Kentucky, I moved away for 20 some odd years and came back helping my mom. But we have this Southern thing of, and I didn't know it until I moved to Philly, to be honest with you. That's where I saw the difference. I've been out west a lot and things, but I didn't really pick up this until I was in Philly. And that was Southerners, hey, we believe you until you do us wrong. Okay, we get your story, Travis, until you do us wrong in some way where we find out you're really not authentic. However, people up in Philly, you have to earn their respect. They don't believe you until, you prove it, time after time after time kind of thing. So that also takes a part too, That comes into play.
You're talking about regional styles.
But it's true, but you got to look at it.
It still comes down, if we were all schooled in critical thinking, just the basic logical way of approaching things. And it doesn't mean that you no longer care about things like compassion, love,
right.
Support for people. It's that you set feelings aside. They're still relevant, but emotion has its place as a reaction, as a response to a thought or an event, but not as a stimulus for a thought or an event. When we are ruled by emotion, and it's emotion that's creating our actions or our beliefs, that's where we go wrong. The appropriate place for emotions is in a response to the world we live in. We love people. We care about people. We want to do the right thing. And there's deep, deep emotions to be felt. It's the richness of life's experience. But to be ruled by emotion and let it control or determine your experience of life is to live artificially, to live an imaginary fantasy world that, what a waste of life. You want to live what's real, not what you invented in your mind.
Do you think that this brought you more emotion after this? Do you think it opened you up to where you felt more than you ever did before, emotionally, love and all the nice things too?
Definitely, profoundly. I think that approaching life in a way where you learn the importance of true facts and true love can add depth to the experience of life and a richness beyond anything that you're going to feel if you let yourself be confined at that lower level where emotions rule or determine what you decide to believe. How ridiculous is that? But I see it all around me.
Give me an example of what you're talking about.
Well, I don't want to, sound like a partisan in politics, but, in so many issues, people come to believe what they want to believe, and then they start gathering evidence to support it,
Right. Right.
They don't like that particular politician, and so because they're opposed to them, they start carefully picking everything that goes against them. Or if they like that politician, they start very carefully picking everything that supports them. And they will not acknowledge, anything that contradicts the opposite of the thing that they've picked.
Right.
And I might comment that in most cases, nobody is 100% that much to where you can say, good grief, everything in the whole world is positive about this person, or everything in the whole world is negative about this person. Mm-hmm. There are no such people. Come on. If you're thinking that way about a candidate, you're lying to yourself.
Travis, I think it's just you and I. I think
100% bad. There's no 100% good.
Travis, I think it's us. I think we're the only ones that are 100% good. It's just us, okay?
That's
I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you. So you know what? Here's something that a lot of people think about the fact that these beings come down, do what they do with us or what they do without us. Some people feel that they don't have, or what makes us special is that we do have emotion, we do have love, we do have things that maybe they don't. That could be something they're looking into. That's
a very popular theory,
yeah.
But
did you notice anything when you were there? To that?
It's only this last year I come up with an explanation for their lack of emotional expression, and maybe I could be responsible for this whole idea that, these people became very advanced technologically, but they lost contact with love and compassion, and that's what makes us so great. Yeah. Well, I think that's a little bit egotistical. People are,
Why?
Human pride. Look how great we are. We're different from them, but we got to be special because we laugh and love and hate. Well, I don't know. I think human emotion can get pretty destructive at times too.
It can, but maybe that is special to us when you hear some of the other stuff that Jacob.
But it's not always good. If emotion rules, a guy goes to school and shoots the girl that rejects him. That's bad.
This is true.
I'm sure he was deeply, deeply wounded and hurt, but not nearly as anything close to justifying harming anyone.
Yeah. But you're looking down at the negative. But look up at the higher. Look at that love. Go to there first, not down there.
That's all good. Who's to say that?
Maybe we are different that way.
Or maybe not. I've always theorized that
I'm not arguing
it would be necessary that the moral and ethical development would have to keep pace with the technology, or they would have destroyed themselves long before this. If they lost all feeling, caring, moral character, or anything like that, what's going to happen is destruction.
Well, if you go to the hybridization project,
if we lose it, if our leaders lose it, if any dictator becomes divorced from moral, ethical, compassion, those kinds of things, that's where the beginning and the end comes.
All those people are very different from the norm because they're in special circumstances with power and have been treated differently all their lives.
Well, it's a megalomaniac thing.
Yeah.
It's got to be very, very different to even get there.
Yeah. But hey, it's fun to talk about. It's way better than politics, isn't it? It's better to talk about this and wonder. But you got close to them.
I'm open to being proven wrong logically on anything I've come to conclude.
Bring it on.
I'm open. Are the facts true? Is the reasoning valid? And I'm persuaded. My allegiance is to the truth, not a truth. And just because I've expressed a theory or a belief that I've come to think after 42 years of thinking about it, I can be persuaded, but you better have good facts and good reasoning. And that's the only basis upon which you can challenge anyone else's belief. You challenge the facts that they're putting forth as factual. Is it really facts? And is their reasoning valid? And there are rules to that. You can teach logic and reasoning.
Yeah.
And you see people pontificating on television all the time, and they are so illogical and so irrational. It's astonishing that somebody can become a pundit and be that irrational.
Well, on the bigger picture of things, there's what we know. I love this one. There's what we know. There's what we don't know. And there's what we don't know that we don't know is a much bigger piece of the pie. There's so much more we don't even have a clue of that these other beings think, what their purpose is. They may not even know what love is, or they may think that's very primitive and they're way beyond it. They could be anything.
Well, we know they're ahead of us technologically, and the presumption that they would have to have moral and ethical development keep pace with that. Give me some other reason, but
Well, I wish we could breathe underwater, but we can't. Right?
We still know that human societies are flawed, and we need to make some improvements in various areas.
It would be nice if we were considered one. If we were just considered humans, one, earthlings, we would come together. That's what I think. I think we would come together and be one instead of all this division that we have here. And I think if the aliens came down and showed themselves and said, hello, we are here, I think that's the one thing that would pull us together. What do you think on that?
Well,
okay, time's up. Sorry. Bye. No, I'm just kidding. What are your thoughts on that, Travis?
The truth is only valuable if you earn it. If some dictator somewhere on the earth comes, I got it. Here it is. It's 100%. And now all the rest of you people are going to believe like this. I've got all the answers. Now, whether he's right or not, even if he's right and he forces this entire country to believe like him, is that really progress? Is that an advancement? What's unique about Western society is the idea of the free form of ideas, that what becomes to be known as truth is arrived at by debate, deliberation, an open exposing of all the different. And then when you come to the truth, you've earned it. And that's much more special than having it imposed upon you. You just believe this because the authoritarian government.
No.
Threatening to think otherwise.
Well, that's like them saying no to it right now. So, but no, what I'm saying is the aliens themselves do it. You can't say no to that. That would be a gift. That would be a gift.
Come by sharing, by showing. Here's how it can be. Do you choose this? If we do it by choice, then it's a wonderful thing. If it's imposed upon us, how's that any different than any
Even by the
Well,
aliens
if you had
itself,
a
though?
powerful enough dictator, you could make everybody absolutely toe-a-line, never hurt each other, never lie, never steal, because if you don't, we're going to cut your hand off,
Right, no,
And
yeah.
you get the behavior that you desire, but you don't actually change the character because you've imposed it rather than allowed it to be chosen.
Well, do you think it's opposed if the aliens did it themselves?
If they could, yeah, but we're not ready. But at some point, they may come and say, "Look at this. This is how these other societies are organized. Would you like to have that or not?"
I think that's where the answer is going to be. Let me get to some questions here for you. So,
okay,
you and I can talk all night. I love it. Let's see. There's so many caps in here. By the way, Anthony Sanchez was on. I saw him earlier, and he said hello.
Hello, Anthony.
Hey, Anthony, what's going on, dude? Yo. Does Travis think, this is by Alan Drake, who absolutely loves you. He loves you. He is a big blue rocker here. He's here a lot. He'll let me know what he doesn't like and likes. And he has been waiting for you for sure. He loves you. And his question, actually, he had a bunch of comments. I think, did it just go away? Here it is. Does Travis think that some of his contact is spiritual? Some of this contact is spiritual.
Well, you'd have to define spiritual, but, it certainly becomes be felt and regarded in that aspect of a personal philosophy that, you incorporate it into your entire philosophy. It includes spiritual thoughts, quote unquote. That gets pretty deep. We could talk all night just on defining spiritual.
Travis comes back tomorrow night because now we can do it on Skype easily. Okay, we'll go on to another question here. Frank LaPink. He was gone 5 days. How much time were you alert during those 5 days that you remember?
I was conscious a very brief amount of time. There were some dreams that came through that, if they were memories leaking back through, there could be additional conscious periods that I'm unable to recall that have been blocked. That's what the hypnotist concluded. However, I do think that probably at least a good part of that time I was either dead or in a coma of some kind, totally.
You think you actually died?
Yeah, in a technical sense, a medical sense. If you get hit with 10,000 volts, your heart stops. I guess you're dead, but you can be revived.
Did you learn most of this stuff from the regression when it came? When you changed your mind, your perspective, how did that come about? When you thought, hey,
that was very gradual and just facing up to the fact that bad health effects weren't manifesting. The consideration of why was I let off this way and not that way, and that showed a concern for my welfare. I mean, they could have dumped me off on some asteroid and, I'd just be, galactic roadkill, they could have just left me laying there. So, it just fits better, fits the facts better. Doesn't mean I'm right. The people who are so fond of the evil alien theory could say I'm just deceived. I get that occasionally, that they're making me think they're benevolent, and that's just how clever they are. They've got you fooled really good. Well, I suppose that's possible. Anything's possible, but you have to go with what's most likely in terms of facts and reasoning. It all comes down to facts and reasoning.
Well, you have a pretty good perspective. You've got more of a perspective than most people because you've definitely experienced it for sure. Has this brought, I don't know if you were a godly man before or after, but did this give you a different perspective of God?
Yeah, I think many of the people who think that they're real super religious and are rejecting the existence of life elsewhere are really selling God short. They're imagining life God can't be anything greater than what's in the Bible. Well, the Bible is an important book written to certain people at a certain time, but to act like if it's not in the Bible, then it just doesn't exist is really an actual argument that's being put forth to me. And when I say, well, the Bible doesn't mention American Indians, American Native Americans, it doesn't mention Antarctica, does that mean they don't exist? So to say, well, since the Bible mentions demons and doesn't mention aliens, then this whole thing is demons, I think is, like I said, selling God short. Far more powerful than you can possibly imagine in that sort of limited scenario.
We've got a lot of nice talk in the chat room. One of them is Anthony, of course, letting you know to remember that you never have to defend yourself ever. And especially here with Blue Rockers, hey, I want to make it safe for anybody to tell their stories, especially you. Does Travis? Oh, some of these are not. See here. Let me get you some good stuff. There's a lot of talk in here. Mike Crow, welcome here tonight. I see that you're in here.
Well, much of what I say can be mistaken for defending myself, but I'm actually defending the truth, whether I have it or not,
Right.
And trying to guide people to an openness to the truth, not necessarily my truth, the truth as it exists. And if people want to think I'm crazy or lying, that's far less important to me than people realizing that there's some really, really important big truths right in front of us that we're going to be a lot better off, much more beneficial to all of society, mankind, if you can just understand some of these basic truths that are right there in front of us.
Earlier, I asked you what celebrities wanted to meet you, but more importantly to me, were there any astronauts that had been out in space, been on the moon, that have wanted to meet you?
I've met 3 or 4 astronauts.
Did you have a conversation?
Yeah. And they're definitely in a position to, like me, be thinking a lot more about this topic. Musicians.
But did the astronauts, were they there saying, hey, we believe you?
Oh, yeah. Because they know things. And, people in the government that are privy to certain things, they understand. But, of course, I'm not going to talk out of school but I've had famous performers, contact me out of the blue, just call me up.
Oh, yeah. I just think it's interesting that the guy's been in space would, because I think if they thought it was a joke, they'd be like, I don't want to meet him. He's a joke. It'll be a bad thing for me. It'll lose my credibility. So I think that's wonderful.
Well, it might hurt their credibility if I told you about them, but in some cases, but some of them are willing to be upfront out there about it. But people who have years of military or Air Force experience, that kind of thing, you'd be surprised how many people who are extremely highly educated believe it, but they're also smart enough to know they can't be open about that. And that's a sad commentary on society.
It's very sad.
I don't find fault with them for that at all, and I will respect their privacy.
You know why. You absolutely know why. So DWDE 115, the drawing that you put in your book, are they as close to what you remember seeing back in 1975? And also, when you showed your DVD in your hand earlier, how do you get one? I want to get that link if it's not inside
you can just get anything that I've got from my website, traviswalton.com.
And it's down below. His website's down below. So, and that's where you can get it. You can't get anything off Amazon. He's got his book. And his DVD,
Yep,
right?
there's no Amazon. There's just fake stuff, and you can get ripped off that way. You can get old versions and pirate things, but it's you're going to get shorted on that. But,
so what you drew in the book, is it close to what you remember that you saw?
As close as I could, but I am working with several other famous, well, I shouldn't say famous, several other artists to redo those. And one of them is working on, what I'm really excited about, a graphic novel. And the entire book will be written in comic book style. This is something that's very popular in the Asian communities of the world. And he's a comic book artist that's, worked for the big ones, Batman, Wonder Woman, all that kind of stuff. So
that's
already
fantastic. That's great. I was going to ask you the future of Travis Walton, and, well, that's gigantic.
Yeah. Well,
that's something to be
I
proud
won't
of.
mention any names, but one of the agents who came to me about this came to be very grateful for the movie Fire in the Sky because it saved his life.
It did.
He works for one of the biggest agencies in Hollywood, but when he was 8 years old, his parents let him watch Fire in the Sky, and he was so terrified he would not sleep in his own room. So there was this giant earthquake in L.A. that night, and they went into his room the next morning, and the bed was cut in half where he would have been sleeping. So he credits Fire in the Sky with having saved his life. So
wow.
He's working on making this happen. And it's really not, the reason it's not going forward any more than it has is because I'm holding back a little bit.
Yeah, why is that?
Some research isn't finished,
Oh, okay. No, that's plausible right there for sure. Well, that's great. One of the things I also love about what it has done for you is there's other people that have stories. You're not the only one with stories, for sure, but you have, yours was, of course, they're all unique, but you've been able to travel abroad with it and tell the stories. Some people just get kind of stuck in one little area. You've been able to enjoy other parts of the globe. I remember, hey, Travis, are you around to do anything? Oh, I'm over in, wherever you are, some place far, far away. And I think that's great.
Yeah,
you got to enjoy that.
I've been amazed at some of the parts of the world that I hear from. I email from Tanzania and Moldova. I don't know where these places are. I have to go look at the map to find out where they are. But this year I'll be going back to Australia and to UK, but I'll go to Norway for the first time too. But people all over the world are aware of this. It's a truth that's worldwide, and so it's a big job.
It is. I hope that, have you been to Antarctica yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, if you go out that way, we really want to hear what you find out, okay? Since a lot of word about Antarctica.
I met somebody who did go there, that played a role in that. That was interesting. But yeah, it would be great to go there someday.
Okay, well, let's save that for another night. We'd love to have you come back sometime. We'll stop with the questions right now. You've been here for 2.5 hours. I really appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for getting through the Skype with us. And is there any last thing you want to say? If you could change it, you would not? Or you would?
What is.
Okay.
May reason prevail. I always say may reason prevail.
Well, sometimes you're like, I wish that night never happened, and other times you've really taken it in a good way. It's probably, I'm sure it's been a tough road as you've done that, but thank goodness you've come through and you're talking the way you are. Whether people want to believe some of your theories or not, it doesn't matter. It's nice hearing the way you talk about it.
I stress they're just my opinion.
Yeah.
It's just my theory.
Yeah.
And if you've got, like I said, if you got facts and reasoning to set me straight, I'm open.
Do you ever get sick of talking about it?
Well, if somebody wants to set me straight and they don't have facts and they don't have reasoning, if it's goofy stuff, that's annoying. But I'm open to other alternative explanations, and I'm not 100% on any one of these theories.
Well, I love your sense of humor, and I love the information.
That's what I say. If it was to happen again, the primary goal would be to get my questions answered.
And what's your biggest one? What's your biggest question?
Well, everything about their agenda. What are we doing in here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Some the really big ones that we all want to know.
You don't ask that question of why me anymore, do you? You probably did at the beginning, but you don't even care about that one anymore, do you?
Yeah, I answer the why me. I was dumb enough to get out. But for whatever reason, it is me. Too many people think why me, and then they start thinking they're special, and that's a big mistake.
Right. Well, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Well, good night.
Well, hold on there. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. If you can just hold on just for a second, if you don't mind. I'd like to say goodbye to everybody, but I wanted you to say goodbye to everybody first. So Travis is going to give his little blue rocker sign for all the blue rockers out there.
All right.
There you go.
Good night, folks. Thanks for listening.
So
I forgive you for not having any questions.
No, they're in there, and they're all intertwined, and it's just rolling. So my eyes are like, and I know yours are too. I appreciate that you stayed up this late with us. So hold on just a second there, Travis, okay? Just hold on 1 second there. Blue Rockers, thanks for showing up. You were watching Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis. And that was Travis Walton. Gave us 2.5 hours of his time tonight. Appreciate that. Make sure you put some things in the comments so he could look at them later to say thank you for his time. And hit like while you're here. Subscribe, please, if you're new. Tomorrow night, Bigfoot Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern. Saturday night, I'll be on Coast to Coast with Samantha Ellen Ritchie, talking about little people, 4 to 5 inches that you can find in the forest. That's kind of cool. And she's got pictures of it too. And then Jerry Wills is on. He is known as a healer and an adventurer. And he's done a whole lot of things. A teacher as well. I think you're going to enjoy listening to him too. He's going to be our featured guest. And then Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, it's Stan's Bible lecture where it's live and you can ask questions. The lecture is at the college level. So it's very interesting. I think you might get a kick out of it as a Blue Rocker. So everybody, thanks for being here. Travis as well. And we will be talking to you, tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Eastern here on Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis.
Thanks for listening.